Welcome to The Science of Creativity, a podcast about art, design, and invention. I'm your host, Dr. Keith Sawyer. On this show, I usually talk about famous creators or breakthrough ideas or world-changing inventions. But sometimes, like today, I tell a different kind of creativity story, the story of how customs are invented. This episode is about New Year's resolutions. Why do we make them? Where did they come from? And who was the first person to ever make a resolution? When did gyms and weight loss programs start advertising in January? Advertising sounds very public, even capitalist, but New Year's resolutions feel personal, private, psychological. But they weren't invented by psychologists. They weren't invented by self-help authors. They definitely weren't invented by productivity gurus. New Year's resolutions are a cultural creation, a social invention. They emerged slowly over thousands of years, shaped by religion, politics, media, and changing ideas about what it means to be a person. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and leave a comment. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are released. Every January, I think about making a resolution. Like most people, I feel like I should make a resolution. It seems like it's almost expected as a way to improve yourself. Also a way to acknowledge your own personal flaws, your weaknesses, what you need to work on. If you don't make a resolution, it's almost like you're being overconfident, as if you think you're already perfect. And everyone can become a better person, right? So every January, we look back at the year that just ended, and then we promise that the next one, we're going to be better. We'll exercise more, we'll drink less, we'll save more, we'll start writing that book we've been thinking about, we'll finally make those changes that we've always been thinking of changing. New Year's resolutions feels like such a natural custom that we assume people have always done it, but they haven't. New Year's resolutions are not a human instinct, they're a tradition. And like all traditions, they were created by many people over a long period of time. In this episode, I'll tell you where this custom started and how it became about personal reflection and self-improvement. It didn't come from any one person or even from one religion or one country. It was a collective creation. I call it a social innovation. New Year's resolutions weren't created so much as they emerged, unpredictable, from the social flow of history. "4,000 years ago in ancient Babylon, people made the first resolutions that historians know about at least, but they didn't call them resolutions, they called them vows, vows to the gods. The Babylonians celebrated the new year with a massive festival they called Akitu. It lasted 12 days. It happened in the spring, not in January. It started with the first new moon after the spring equinox. During Akitu, people promised the gods that they would repay their debts, they'd return borrowed tools, they'd keep their word to other people. And if they didn't, the gods would punish them. These resolutions weren't about personal happiness and growth. They were about social trust. They were about public promises made to keep society working. 2,000 years ago, the Romans changed everything. In 46 BCE, Julius Caesar, who was emperor of the Roman Empire, created the Julian calendar. Yes, it was named after him, Julius. He declared January 1st the start of the new year. Before then, pretty much every culture celebrated the new year in the spring. That's because planting began then. Plants were necessary for food and for survival. In Babylonia, Persia, ancient Greece, even the early Roman calendar, the new year started in spring. Rome shifted it from March to January for pretty obscure reasons. They were fighting a difficult war in Spain. It sounded really obscure to me when I looked it up. And even so, here we are 2,000 years later, and we've never moved it back to the spring. January was named after Janus, the god with two faces. One face looked backwards, one face looked forwards. Sounds pretty familiar with the New Year's resolutions, right? The Romans marked the New Year by making vows to the gods and to each other. They called the vows vota. They promised, for example, to live well, to act honorably, to be good citizens. That sounds familiar too. The promises were often public and sort of ritualized. They weren't at all private. They weren't self-help sort of goals. They were promises to be loyal to Rome, loyal to the empire, and support the empire and the emperor and the state. Critically, they were forward-looking and emphasized becoming a better person in the next year. And this sort of backwards and forward structure, the Janus god looking one face back and one face in the other direction, that structure is still with us today. In the coming centuries, as Christianity spread across Europe, the Christians were pretty suspicious of the Roman pagan holidays, but they still made recurring moral commitments, such as confessions and promises to repent and to live a more godly life. The Christians held New Year's Eve services that they called Watch Night, and this started in the early Middle Ages. They gathered overnight to confess their sins, to pray, to reflect on the past year, and to commit to a more moral life in the next year. This was particularly important in Methodism, as in the Methodist Church. The founder of Methodism, John Wesley, promoted the first night, Watch Night services. But what was a particularly important cultural innovation was this key historical shift. Away from the Roman vota, which were public vows, in Christianity, the vows became thought of as internal, personal, and moral. They became promises of making yourself a better person. And this led to the idea that moral improvement happens inside the self, and that regular examination of the internal self was a spiritual practice, for example, as with the confession. Protestantism changed resolutions yet again. With the Protestant Reformation, the Protestants rejected the idea of confessing your sins to a priest. Instead, they emphasized individual conscience and personal responsibility. The Catholic practice of confession was replaced with a notion of a personal examination of the past and personal resolutions for the future. "300 years ago, something new appeared. In 1722, a young preacher named Jonathan Edwards wrote a list called resolutions. He put the word resolutions up at the top of the page. And there were 70 of them. They were pretty intense, and they included, for example, these two: resolved to live with all my might, and resolved never to lose one moment of time. Edwards reread these every week for the rest of his life. He didn't tie the resolutions to January 1st, but in later centuries, that's what happened. Edwards created the template for resolutions to be a type of personal self-engineering. They became systematic and self-directed. Even though they didn't happen at the new year and they happened all year round, they had that same set of properties as our New Year's resolutions today. In particular, the self is no longer something that you discover. It's something that you build on your own. Christianity transformed resolutions in three ways. First, that the self was a moral being. You could fail, but you could also succeed and become better. Second, your own individual intentions mattered. This was a rejection of the idea that life was predictable, that God controlled everything, the predestination belief. But in this case, you had agency over your life, and that's why a resolution could actually have an impact in the future year. The third was that the movement of time had a moral dimension. Society began to think in terms of personal growth and self-improvement. Another big shift is that resolutions became even more inward and more private. They were definitely no longer public and ritualized, as they had been in Rome and even in the early Middle Ages, and even with the Christian church in medieval times. And they were no longer shared with anyone else like a priest, as in the Catholic Church with confessions. Resolutions were personal, inward, and private. During the 1700s in the British colonies in the Americas, Benjamin Franklin was doing something pretty similar. It still wasn't part of New Year's celebrations, but it further developed Jonathan Edwards' idea of personal moral growth, and it transformed that idea into the modern resolutions that we have today. Benjamin Franklin tracked his behavior against a list he made of 13 virtues, and the virtues included eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Right? This was an example of moderation and self-control. And another one was resolve to perform what you ought, perform without fail what you resolve. It's to honor your promises, right? Franklin focused on one virtue per week, and he tracked his failures every week in a notebook with these black dots. He believed that character could be optimized, measured, and improved. Sounds like a really modern idea. The idea that you can remake yourself through your intentions and your goals. And that idea spread everywhere. By the late 1700s, a lot of people had started writing down their resolutions. And this practice really grew so that in the 18th century, these resolutions started to migrate to the New Year's holiday. And then in the 1800s, New Year's resolutions started to spread pretty much everywhere. And people were saying things now to their families like, in the new year, I'm going to promise to stop drinking so much. If you follow this podcast, you know that I love talking about things that appear in the newspaper or in the media, really interesting historical details. And if you go back to the newspapers in the 1800s, by 1861, newspapers were already making fun of this practice of New Year's resolutions. I found an 1861 newspaper with a joke, "A New Year's resolution is a triumph of hope over experience." Sounds like a joke someone could have made last year, right? And then there's another newspaper that wrote, "These resolutions are born on January 1st and they're buried by February." Newspaper jokes like these really would only work with readers if the custom was widely practiced and everyone understood it, right? If you don't even know about the custom, if you don't know someone who's made a resolution, then when you read this joke, it wouldn't make any sense. So there must have been a lot of people making these resolutions. And the joke is also funny if not everyone does it, or not the reader, right? Because you don't want to be the butt of the joke, but it's okay to laugh at someone else. But it means that the resolutions really were spreading as a nationwide custom. People making fun of resolutions didn't slow down the practice at all. It kept growing. In the early 1900s, radio hosts were urging listeners to make resolutions. Mary Margaret McBride was one of the most influential American radio hosts in the 1930s, the 1940s, and the 1950s. She was known for intimate and conversational advice, like the first talk radio host. In her New Year's broadcast, she would encourage people to reflect on the past year and make personal resolutions for the next year. And she was emphasizing self-improvement and developing relationships. Resolutions like quit smoking, save money, be nice to other people, and improve yourself. She would say things like, quote, "As the year turns, think quietly about one thing that you can do better, not for anyone else, but for yourself." By this point, resolutions had completed a transformation from the Babylonian and the Roman days of being public and ritualized and outward focused, and now they were focused inwardly to intimate self-help. The responsibility now shifted entirely onto the individual. You could fail or you could succeed, and either way, it was your responsibility, but there was always that promise of success, of personal growth. By the mid-20th century, advertisers noticed something important about resolutions. The resolutions created desires for self-improvement, but those desires could be monetized. By the 1950s, women's magazines in their January issues were advertising slimming products, for example. Like magazines like Ladies' Home Journal, they were featuring January Fresh Start stories. By the 1960s, gyms were promising a new body this year. Diet ads promised the new you. Weight Watchers was founded in 1963, and they made liberal use of January ads. By the 1970s, January was the single most important month for dieting programs. By the 1980s, every company was in on this sales concept. Health clubs started to rely on new members joining in January. At this point, resolutions really were no longer sacred. They were strategic, public, they were part of the consumer economy. The sad fact is that most people fail to keep their New Year's resolutions. This has been true for as long as anyone has been measuring it. What the research shows, across decades of surveys and studies, the results are pretty consistent that the overall success rates are very low. About 8 to 20% of people fully keep the New Year's resolutions. About 80 to 90% either abandon them completely or they really fall pretty short. The exact number varies by study, but the pattern is stable. Most resolutions fail. This isn't a new thing. As I was just saying, newspapers were joking about it all the way back in 1861. So when do people usually fail? Studies that track timing, they discovered that in mid-January, about 1/4 of people had already given up on their resolution. By early February, almost half had quit. And by 6 months, the majority of people are no longer actively pursuing their resolution. So this is why February has long been the punchline month in newspaper jokes, even all the way back in the 1800s. So who's more likely to succeed? What can you do to increase your chances? The research suggests that you're more likely to succeed if you, for example, set specific goals rather than vague goals. For example, you say, I want to lose 5 pounds, instead of saying, I want to lose weight. And the second one is you focus on approach goals instead of avoidance goals. And an approach goal is something positive, like I'm going to exercise 3 times a week. An avoidance goal is something like stop being lazy. And a third factor for success is that you have some sort of social support or accountability. So you're doing the resolutions with other people, or you're sharing the fact that you made a resolution, and other people will know in February and March how you're doing. No one single person invented the custom of New Year's resolutions. It was a long historical arc of collective creativity. It's what I call social innovation. New Year's resolutions emerged unpredictably from communities, from cultures. They emerged with ideas coming from religion, from self-help, from Roman gods, and even with help from the advertising industry and the fitness craze. Each generation added something new to the custom. And that's what I call collective creativity. When you make a New Year's resolution, you're participating in a 4,000-year-old human tradition. It's a ritual of hope. It's a way to mark time. It's a way to imagine a better future. It's an opportunity to reflect on the past year, an opportunity to look forward and better understand your aspirations and your goals. In a way, it's not so important whether you do exactly what you resolved to do. You still have that opportunity to reflect backwards on the past year, and you still have that opportunity to think a little bit about what's important to you. It helps you understand yourself better. You discover what you value when you envision your future self, and that vision moves you down the path to personal growth. That's a form of self-development. Really, it's not about the end. It's about the journey. Thank you for listening to this story about New Year's resolutions. I hope the history will inspire you to make your own resolution. Even if you're not completely successful, you'll realize that just doing it helps you. You'll learn from the act of reflection and from thinking about the future. If you like this episode, I hope you'll share it with a friend, share it with someone who's interested in creativity, who's interested in reflection and personal growth. And like the show, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you for listening to The Science of Creativity.